Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Daniel, and today in this video we'll be covering my round 5 game from a tournament I played pretty recently, the 2022 July Open. It was an online tournament, and my online rating at the time was 1982. So let's take a look at what happened in this game. So I'm playing black, and here my opponent had just played the move queen to d2. So for those of you wondering, this was a same-ish King's Indian defense, the same-ish variation with the move f3 by white, and this f3 move is often characterized by a oncoming kingside attack by white with g4 and h4, as you can see happened in this game. And for me, my plans are to attack on the queen side. As you see, I have my rook and queen placed pretty aggressively near his king, and my idea is obviously to try to checkmate him before he can get to me. So in this position, before he played queen to d2, I had just played queen to a3, threatening checkmate in 1 on b2. So he plays queen to d2, dropping back to protect against the mate threat. So here I spent the most amount of time that I spent in this whole game. I spent around 15 minutes here trying to figure out what the best continuation here was. So basically, obviously, I want to try to get this rook to b8. That's what I had figured. That would be my game plan. Because with the rook on b8, pretend this bishop was in here. Let's say the rook was on b8. Then I would have two rooks on the b file, and they would be lining up on this b2 pawn. And if this rook was here right now, then obviously I could play rook takes b2, and I would simply be winning the game because he only has one defender of the b2 pawn. And so that's why I want to bring the rook to b8 so that I can put up even more pressure against the b2 pawn and where his king is. So I was trying to find the most effective way to do so. Obviously, first I have to move this bishop somehow. I thought about bishop to b7, but bishop to b7 seemed a little bit slow here. There's knight to c1, wanting to go to d3, which I found a bit annoying. And also, I found that if this rook gets kicked out, it doesn't actually have that many squares. It only has b6 because now this bishop is blocking b7. So I didn't really like this option. Besides from that, I also consider maybe moving the knight to b6 to maybe get in on c4 or a4, and then maybe putting the bishop on a square like e6 or d7. However, here I didn't really like this option because say in the future, maybe like after h5 and g5, in a last-ditch scenario, if I really misplay this position, because I knew before the speculative knight to b6, I knew I was better, if not a lot better in this position, since I think my attack was going to break through. Obviously, white just had to drop their queen back, so this wasn't very good for them. So going back to knight to b6, in the final scenario, if I really somehow misplay this position and white gets the open h file and plays g5 at some point to kick my knight away with their queen on h6, I want to be able to sacrifice this knight by capturing back with the other knight, so that at least I have some final defenses, and maybe in those moments where I get those final defenses, I can maybe break through on the queen side, which is why I didn't want to move this knight. So here, after some long thought, I came up with the best move in the position, which was the move a5. So a5, the idea with this move is, as I mentioned, however here, my plan is to play bishop to a6 instead. So after white played rook to g1, I played bishop to a6. So bishop to a6 is really useful because here, instead of, compared to the move bishop to b7, which I mentioned earlier, now I actually have rook to b7, rook back to b7, if I really need to play rook back to b7, if my opponent decides to somehow attack my rook. Instead, where the bishop was on b7, then I would only have c6 at the moment, or even b3, but b3, it can also get attacked. So here after bishop to a6, I've opened up the last rank for me, so I can play rook f to b8 on the next move if he doesn't challenge my threats. So rook to g1 also really, in my mind, wasn't much of a sensible move because it doesn't really accomplish much. And also, the idea for him was obviously attack on the king side, but I think at this point he should probably just focus on defending instead because his queen is already dropped back and I have insurmountable pressure here. So bishop to a6. He plays knight to c1. As expected, I expected this move. I expected he would play knight to d3. However, here, I realized that, say they were to play knight to d3, then I have the move rook to b3, because rook to b3, if I play rook f to b8 right now, then after rook to b3, then I put even more pressure on the c3 knight, because keep in mind this b2 pawn is pinned. So rook f to b8, and knight to d3 as expected, and here rook to b3. So rook to b3 it obviously attacks this knight twice, and there's only actually one actual defender, whereas this defender is a fake defender. Let's say after h5, for example, then I can play rook takes c3. Obviously, you can't take back because then this pawn can't actually take because it is pinned. So here after rook to b3, he played the move knight to a2, which seems sensible to me. After knight to a2, I thought you would play knight 8 to c1 or even knight d to c1, depending on his preference and depending on what I would play. So here I played the move bishop takes c4. Bishop takes c4, the reason for this is obviously, firstly, I win a pawn. Secondly, I'm trying to chop off this knight. So say after h5, then I can take this bishop, I can take this knight, and this knight had a very important job. It defended the b2 point. So now without this knight here, I can actually take on b2 on the next move, considering this move is check, so this is very beneficial for me. This is also why I thought they would play like knight 8 to c1, for example. Here, however, he shocked me and played the move knight to b4. So knight to b4, the idea is to somehow cut off the circulation between my two rooks and also further attack my bishop. Although this move kind of just gives away a piece. Here I play a really flashy move, a really tactical move, which simplifies the position quite a bit and actually leads me to be up material. So here, as you saw earlier, I played the move rook takes b2, which is honestly the highlight point of this game. This is really the most flashy and the exclamation point of the game. So after rook takes b2, the idea is very simple. After queen takes b2, I can play bishop takes a2. So bishop takes a2, there's actually no way to take back that's really effective. So my opponent in the game, they play king to a1. Here, obviously, if knight takes a2, then simply queen takes b2 checkmate. And obviously after queen takes b2, then I would simply have rook takes b4 check. So you go king to a1, then I have queen to c3, only move queen to b2, then I take checkmate. And say, let's say, obviously king to c2 would just lose the queen, and mate would soon follow. King, and obviously those are the two only legal moves. So yeah, this would lead to mate really quickly. So my opponent, he played king to a1. King to c1 I thought would be a better try. However, I do have queen to e3, forking the king and the rook. So this should be winning for me nonetheless. So my opponent played king to a1. Obviously, the biggest thing that we look at firstly is, can I move the bishop? I can't actually move the bishop because let's say I play bishop to b3 attacking the rook, then there would simply be queen takes a3, and I would actually in fact be losing this game instead of winning it. So here I quickly slide the queen back one square, attacking the rook, and I still have this discovered check. So queen to a4. And here he plays another trying to cut the circulation type move. Here he plays bishop to b5, stopping this pin for a move or two, this pin of the knight to the queen. However, I can simply just take it with the queen. Here I considered what piece I should take with. I think that queen takes is probably the best move, and the computer agrees. Because after rook takes b5, after queen takes, I didn't really like this because say I take with the queen, take the knight, then there... Oh, wrong move there. I meant rook to b1, then I would have to... actually, my bad, rook to b1 isn't a good move. I forgot there's queen takes d4. But here there's the move rook to d3, because then you can bring the other rook to b1 while protecting this point on d4. And I didn't really like this because I didn't really want to settle into an even more simplified version of this, because I thought I had enough pieces to honestly launch an attack and just checkmate him straight away. Obviously, pawn takes in my mind wasn't really sensible because I really just block in my rook, and now actually there's knight takes a2, and in fact I'm actually I'm still better. However, it's a bit more difficult to win considering my opponent's up in exchange. So here I decided queen takes b5, which is in fact the best move. King takes a2. King takes and queen takes honestly are the same thing. Afterwards I would play a takes b4 either way. Here my opponent for some reason decides to continue launching an attack on the king side, even though there's no attack that's going to happen. I play rook to a8 check, and my idea is very simple, to play b3 and rook to a2. King to b1, and I simply play b3 as I mentioned. Here he takes, still trying to generate some counterplay which honestly doesn't exist. I play rook to a2, attacking the queen. He takes on f7. I play king takes f7, and here he plays queen to c3. I attack the queen once again, and now he's forced to the corner, queen to a1. And here I play this nice move, rook to f2. So rook to f2, my idea is obviously to play queen to e2, and then go for checkmate. And here my opponent takes, trying to generate even more counterplay. However, here I don't even bother protecting my knight. I simply just play queen to e2, and now mate is in fact unavoidable. The computer really just prolongs it with meaningless checks, and then at this point it just gives away all his pieces. So here my opponent played queen to a3, and then I play queen to c2, and here in fact I promote to queen and I get checkmate. So very nice attacking game, starting, well, technically not starting, but continuing the attack with the really nice idea of a5 in order to open up my bishop to a6, and allowing my rook to go to the b8 square, which took place right here. So after a6, bishop to a6, and now I can bring in my other pieces. So a very nice attacking game with that very nice idea of a5, and then opening up my rook to get to b8 to launch even more pressure down the b2 pawn. And yeah, it was actually against a really strong opponent as well. So I'm actually really happy with this game. And in fact, this is actually a game that so my opponent played the Samish, of course, and last time I played against the Samish, which was the Philadelphia Open round 1, the game where I had the exchange sacrifice, where I played the exchange sacrifice. In that game, in fact, in the opening, I was completely beat, and I'm really happy to now have learned how to play against the Samish and launch a really nice attacking game against it. So, hope you all enjoyed, like and subscribe as usual, and yeah, thanks for watching.